What was your first thought, when you became the CEO? You mentioned somewhere in 2008.
If you believe in something, stay course. Like have patience. The big thing on why leadership fails, in my opinion, is when leaders stop listening.
Hello and welcome to Why Leadership Fails, a podcast where there is no typical gyan, no stereotypical tales of glory. Instead, we bring to you unscripted, unfiltered conversations about real-life experiences of leaders, navigating challenges, embracing failures, and redefining success. I am your host, Bhavna Lalchandani, VP Digital Business at Hindustan Times. Today we have an esteemed guest who is a visionary leader and has made significant contributions to various global giants. From being the CEO of Forbes to the managing director at Yahoo India and currently leading Quora for APAC. He's also been an entrepreneur and has founded an edtech startup. So if you're an aspirational leader like me who dreams of leading a global organization or maybe starting up a global venture, this episode is just for you. Join us as we delve into this journey, explore the pitfalls of leadership, uncover valuable lessons, and also have some fun along the way. So stay tuned till the very end. Hi Gurmit, welcome to Why
Hi,
Leadership
Bhavna.
Fails.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation.
I'm so happy to see you.
So am I happy to be here and be of use.
So delving straight into your career trajectory, it has indeed been incredible. So what was that standout point, or a turning moment that actually led to this career path?
So I'll start from my schooling. So I went to an army school called Sainik School Korakonda, which is in Andhra Pradesh. And I honestly believe leadership starts kind of early. So in Sainik School Korakonda, one had the opportunity of some leadership things like, the house captain and things like that. That kind of set the ball rolling. So when I started working, one thing I was very sure that as a leader, visually, you need to have all the qualities. So for example, people are watching you early on, right? So what is your level of integrity? How, concentrated are you on your work? So things like that. So visual leadership is something which starts really early. You don't have to be a leader to have that quality. Even when you're like an individual contributor, how you kind of play it out is very, very important. You kind of work hard, you come up with intelligent ideas, you take the initiative. So these are things that people kind of, appreciate and then they start respecting you. And gradually, when you start getting leadership opportunities, then things start falling in place. Similarly, I started my career with Marico Industries. So I started off in sales as an area sales manager. So they gave me the smallest region as an area sales manager, which was Chandigarh, Himachal and J&K. But the performance was good. Then I moved to a larger role. And then eventually we had a very important launch at Marico, and I moved to that particular region where the test launch was happening. And later on went on to head the largest depot, what we would call there.
What
the
does depot
area.
signify?
So a depot is basically an area which services X number of states or a particular state.
Okay.
So that area which I handled was the largest area in Marico industry, which is Delhi Foods at that point of time. So it started that way, and then it kind of continued. So in Marico, if you do well in sales and if you have inclination towards product management, marketing and all of that, then a selected few are kind of moved to that role. So I moved to a marketing role in Marico, which was the brand called SIL. So in SIL, again, it was a small brand, but it kind of grew very, very well. And after that, I moved on to other companies. I worked with Sony Music for a while as the regional head of North and the marketing head of North, and then later on moved on to the India Today group, and then got an opportunity to work for a startup, because at that point of time Napster was happening. So music was getting digital, and everyone wanted to be in the digital field. So I got an opportunity to work for a company called Rajshri Media, which was supported by a large production house by the same name out here, and an investor. So it was a startup which was aiming to stream full-length Bollywood films for free.
Wow.
So this was as early as in 2008, where broadband was not there in India. So it was quite a bold move, but
Very nascent stages.
yes, absolutely. And we all thought it will have like great future, and it's always good to be an early starter, right? So your brand recall is higher. So my first CEO assignment in a way was Rajshri Media, where I was the CEO of Rajshri Media. And from Rajshri Media, I happened to move on to gain some experience in advertising sales. And in advertising sales, I think my high point was being the CEO of Forbes. So that was amazing, because at that point of time, Forbes was the number 2 next to Fortune.
Yeah.
And we came up with some fantastic properties. Like we came up with a digital edition, we came up with lots of marquee events, which really took the brand to the next level. And obviously revenue always kind of follows. So if you get your brand positioned rightly, revenue is a matter of time. It kind of follows. And from Forbes, I moved on to head Yahoo in India. Yahoo was again at a very inflection point at that point of time, where Marissa Mayer had taken over, and there was a lot of enthusiasm on what the brand could do. There were lots of acquisitions they were happening, and it was in a very, very good scenario at that point of time. It was on a great path at that point of time. So at Yahoo I was there for nearly 4.5 years, and during the period Yahoo was bought over by Verizon, and then a lot of changes happened out there. And then I did my startup, and now I'm with Quora, like you said, heading the APAC and MENA region. And the brand is a fantastic brand. It's a Mountain View, California based company. It's into knowledge sharing, and doing extremely well in India and many other countries.
So, this certainly has been an incredible journey, like I mentioned. So, I'm really curious to know, what was your first thought, when you became the CEO? You mentioned somewhere in 2008, with Rajshri, you got an opportunity as a first assignment to become the CEO. How did it feel?
So it obviously felt great, because you were going to head a company, and that to a great designation to have, and a startup which is in the digital space. So all the boxes were kind of ticked. So it felt kind of wonderful, and one went into the role with a lot of enthusiasm and dreams that this is what we would do, and we had a lot of strategy and all of that. But what I think could be relevant for this show is what went wrong out there, or what is that which I didn't imagine would happen. So when you become a CEO, it's not that you're just the head of a company, or you're making strategy, driving everyone. It is all of that. You're responsible for people, right? As a CEO, you're like not only responsible for the career of people, but also for the well-being of people. So my experience at Rajshri was media was ahead of its time. So broadband was not yet there in India, so it was there in Canada, US, Australia. So most of our users were there. We were hoping that Jio would start, but 2008 was too early, so it hadn't kind of started. So we were way ahead of time. At that point of time, there was no AWS and all of that. So you typically had to have your content on servers, physical servers, and the streaming costs were very, very high. So the product was ahead of its time. And therefore, after a period of time, we were unable to take the cost, rationalize the cost, because the growth in revenue was not as much as we kind of thought. Primarily because the advertisers were in India, the users were overseas, so it was kind of a mismatch in a way ahead of its time. So therefore, so that impacted everyone. And when people had to leave Rajshri Media, that was really, really painful for me as a CEO, because I was not only responsible for their career, like I said, I was responsible for their lives as well. So that's something which I learned, which later on, whenever I headed companies, and even now, I'm extremely conscious to the fact that, one is responsible for the lives of people who kind of work for that particular organization, and, what best you can do to make them more secure, to make their lives better, apart from, having better careers.
Sure. So, in fact, when one gets into the C-suite role, the excitement is immense. But at the same time, have there been any insecurities that what next for me, for example?
One of the things I can share is I became a CEO very early on in life. So once you become the CEO or the head of a company, it's like a lonely spot, right? So you're the only person out there. Often you have, a lot of thoughts which are there. So often you kind of bounce off ideas with your team and all of that. But somewhere you need that kind of, bonding with people as well. So that is something which, in a way, is a challenge at the top. And you have to figure out, so you find out a lot of happiness in kind of enabling others, in seeing the happiness of others, in seeing the growth of others. So in a way it is fun as well, in a way it's kind of challenging as well. So it's kind of mixed in a way, and it sounds very rosy and good to the outsider, but there is so much self-created pressure for a CEO or for the head of a company, and that is, I think, a big challenge to handle.
Sure. So in fact, you spoke about teams, and when it comes to global organizations, there are different regions that one actually handles, different teams. How do you really promote diversity, equity, and inclusion amongst teams?
I think that's a great question. I am glad you kind of asked that, because I have a story to tell out here. So I was doing my own startup in 2018. And at that point of time, Quora approached me saying that, can you evaluate whether it makes sense to have a team in India? And, because we have a lot of users out in India, and does it make sense to have a sales team out here? So I did this project for them and shared with them, and eventually it got approved by the board, and we decided to have a team in India. So one of the things was that we'll have a team simultaneously in Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, because these are the three centers for where all the advertisers are. So simultaneously we opened offices in Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, and we started, of course, hiring in due course. So when we started hiring, the most important thing we had in mind was diversity, because when you're setting up something, the foundation becomes very, very critical to what you will be 5 years later, 10 years later, etc. So having diversity was very, very important. And diversity is not gender alone.
Yes.
So in India, diversity could be even culture.
Absolutely.
India, if you see, is a country in a country. Each state is virtually like a country having different culture.
Sure.
So how do you have people from varying cultures? So we made sure that we don't have too many people of the same culture. So we have like good diversity in culture as well.
That's interesting.
Then the other thing we took care of is, how to hire people from different companies. When you start a new company, you're very tempted to hire people with whom you worked.
Yes.
So suppose if I worked with Yahoo, and I'm tempted to hire everyone from Yahoo into Quora. So which we didn't do. We had a rule saying that we will not have more than 2 people from the same company. So that way we had diversity in terms of companies as well, background as well, where people kind of came from. And that really helped, because, people bring new ideas, fresh ideas, and that kind of really helped us, set up really, really well.
Sure.
So having this diversity at the, hiring level is something which helps, build good teams, and also helps kind of, build culture, which is then, kind of uniform. And then there are the usual ways of enabling teams and all of that, which I guess we'll talk more as we kind of go along.
Sure. So when, teams, of course, with different dynamics come together, while it is great because, there is a lot of creativity and ideas that develop, but at the same time, there would be conflicts as well. So as a CEO, how do you deal with that?
I think most companies, particularly US-based companies, are very, very strong with processes. So, like you see, even at Yahoo, you had a dashboard for everything which was completely transparent, right? HR practices and appraisals, everything was through a common tool which kind of happened. Expenses which you submitted were again very, very transparent. Policies were very, very transparent. So it's very important to have a good process, a robust process for everything. The second most important thing is to have transparency. The more you have transparency, the more you kind of, build faith, the more, people kind of are aligned better. So these are a few things which kind of, help. And then there's the usual stuff, but I would highlight these two things as the main thing.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. And, in global companies, the processes are already set. But, when it comes to startup, I myself have been a founder of a startup. It is right from ground zero, right? And you've been a startup entrepreneur as well. So what was your startup journey? How did, you get inspired to get into the entrepreneurial role? And, all these global learnings that you're talking about, how difficult was it when you had your own startup, to deal with teams, to ensure that there is DEI included, promoted? If you could talk a little about that.
Startup is an interesting journey in the sense everyone is aware that startup starts with one person. So, you are doing everything from conceptualizing to photocopying to, booking tickets to all of that. So one was kind of aware of that in a way. And startups have fewer people, right? So it's very easy to communicate if it is an early stage startup. And when it's easy to communicate, people tend to kind of do that in the interest of time, rather have a process. So processes are very few when it is a startup.
Yes.
And as the startup grows into, a mid-stage startup and a late-stage startup, then that's when the kind of processes start coming in. So the startup I did was, roughly for a year and a half. So it was in its early stage as well. So there were hardly any processes. So there was not much I could leverage from the processes I'd learned in the companies. So that was there. So it was more like, getting to talk to people, getting things done very, very easily. What I thought was the most important learning in the startup I did was that ideally a startup should be a bunch of people, like a couple of co-founders at least, because then it kind of, there are multiple heads are always better than one, and you could have people with different set of skills. One of the things I kind of missed in my startup was having a tech co-founder. So the big learning there was if I had a tech co-founder, then defining the tech vision and what is possible out there, that becomes much more easier, because if you're doing like I was doing an ed tech startup, right?
Yes.
So you need to have some tech differentiator for sure,
Right.
so that people come in. So there is of course content which is king on one side, but then it has to be simultaneously tech as well, right?
Correct.
So it has to be a good mix of both. So I missed the tech co-founder in my startup, and I think that was the biggest learning I had.
No, absolutely. In fact, during my startup also, I remember that, one learning that I had was the team and the complementary skills that, the co-founders got on the table with the right skin in the game. So I feel business, tech and finance, these three things were the essentials.
No, absolutely. When we do startups, we obviously want to make it big, and we also worry about finances and all of that. But I think the most important thing is to see the big picture, and then kind of work from there. And therefore, I think it is very, very important to have, like you said, co-founders with complementing skills, and especially a good mix of content if you're in that space, and tech.
Right. So after the startup, then you joined Quora. So were there learnings that you took as an entrepreneur? Because Quora again was kind of a startup, in India, though, as a part of the global ecosystem.
It was amazing actually, because as a startup, you go through the entire process of setting up a company, and so there are small things like having a digital signature, registering stuff, and all of that. So when we set up Quora in India, all that was very easy because I already kind of knew that. So I joined Quora in November of 2019. And by January 15, 2020, we had set up the company. Everything was done. Simultaneously, we had started hiring. So by February, we had finished the hiring as well. And unfortunately, by March, there was COVID. And therefore the lockdown, which is, another challenge. And we can talk about that.
Sure.
But the startup really helps you figure out what are the levers for quick setup and getting started off in a faster manner.
Absolutely.
So Quora was off the blocks, and I speak, I have a friend in Spotify, Amarjeet Batra, who set up Spotify in India, and we would talk, and he's like, man, how have you set it up in like 1.5 months? So yeah, it was amazing. The startup really helped me
Absolutely. So
set up faster. Yeah.
So the entire journey, right, whether it's working with global organizations or working in a startup, one can actually use and leverage the
100%.
learnings across.
Because these are real life experiences, right? So they connect to each other.
Totally. Absolutely. So Gurmeet, in fact, you spoke about challenges, and you worked in global companies, you've led them, you've been an entrepreneur. What's the biggest failure or setback that you've experienced, in your career path, and how did you really bounce back?
So the first big setback, like I said, was, Rajshri Media, where, you were responsible for the entire team and their lives and all of that. So not being able to foresee what was going to happen, or the future, or understanding technology in a way, or ground realities in a way, that is something where I thought, I should have done better prep. And so that, I'm kind of impacting lives of people. So therefore, one should do that better. The second was my own startup, which again, I talked about that, that was a failure because, we couldn't have a tech differentiator, and I missed a tech co-founder, badly out there. But the learning in both the cases was that, pick up the learnings and kind of move on. Do something next where, your passion and inclination drives you to go there. So that's what I did. And I got this opportunity with Quora, and it kind of resonated well with what I was doing, because I was in the business of EdTech business, which is education, knowledge. Quora was, a knowledge sharing network, kind of, it was in line with what it was. So I identified myself with the mission of what, Quora was wanting to do.
Sure.
And so that kind of helped.
That's great. Awesome. So what inspires you as a leader? You, of course, did speak about passion, I know. So if you could elaborate a little bit more about it. What inspires you and motivates you? It's been more than a decade since you've been the CEO and MD. How do you keep going still? What really wakes you up in the morning?
So what happens is, once you experience particular thing, like, when you're not a CEO, you want to become a CEO. When you become a CEO, you're like, what next? So after a while, you start getting a lot of, joy in enabling people, seeing people grow. So I remember the time when you did your own startup, and, I felt very, very happy about it, that, you actually were taking the plunge, doing something of your own and all of that. So when
you were super supportive.
Of course, that I would definitely want to do that, for all kind of people who, where I believe in the concept or the talent. Similarly, I've had lots of people in my career who kind of went out and did their own companies. And they've really kind of done well. There's, companies have really, really done well.
Sure.
So there was a lady in Music Today, one of the companies I work, Manu Kohli, who went and did her own bit, that did well. There was Shaheen in the same company who did her own events management company, and that's kind of doing well. There was Nidhi in that company who's eventually became a writer, and she's written books, and she's also into now television shows and films. So when I see people kind of grow,
Yeah.
it gives you a lot of happiness. So the effort is, how do you enable people to grow? And when you see them succeed, and even if they go like way beyond you, I have a few people who've really kind of grown even beyond what I would think. You feel really proud of it. You feel that you've done something which is enabling people to kind of figure out their talent to the highest level.
Yeah, of course. So that's awesome. And, in fact, while speaking about your own trajectory, the way it has been, early on CEO, ups and downs as well, enabling your teams, right? And the network that you have is also, people who've really grown, whether it's startups, whether again, your friends who are CEOs. So if you were to take the learnings, just across all, and go back when you were a 22-year-old, for example, what would you really impart as a lesson to that person?
So one of the things which I think all of us probably could maybe resonate or vibe with is that when we are starting our jobs, we are in a hurry to kind of get to a particular place. So I often find people switch jobs very early on, kind of move on to another job and then to another job, in trying to find growth.
Yeah.
So if I were to turn the clock and take my learnings and all, my first big learning, which I think is, Marico was my first job, and I worked there for about 5.5 years. I still think I left that company too early. So,
5.5 years.
Yes. I think I could really would have continued there, and I should have grown even more out there while I grew kind of from sales to marketing and all. I think there's much more one could do there, not only for your own self but for the company as well. So that is something which is a learning that comes to my mind, that if you believe in something, stay course, like have patience. You will have ups and downs, but just stay afloat. And there will be a time which will be there where you will get to take a spike up. So that thing will go. Life is careers and life is like a sine curve. What goes up kind of goes down and vice versa. So spend considerable time in a place pursuing what you kind of believe in, and take it to the next level.
Sure. In fact, I have a different thought as well. So I feel that yes, while 5 years is a good amount of time to spend, but nowadays there is so much happening that at times people become complacent or very comfortable in the same company, even if though you're doing different roles. But that complacency sometimes just creeps in, and then it becomes difficult to explore new opportunities. So while I think the Gen Zs who shift within 6 months or less than a year, at the same time because of the dynamic nature of the industry, like 5 years ago there was no AI, there was no reels, the way things are moving. But it's important to experience different cultures as well.
You have a point. I agree with what you say, but there is a rider to that. So sometimes you are lucky to work for organizations that give you opportunities to grow, to learn, and all of that. And I believe Marico was one of those companies which kind of gives you opportunities to learn and grow. So if you're working in a company that is giving you these opportunities, just shifting for the sake of it kind of really doesn't make sense.
Absolutely.
If your organization doesn't give you those kind of opportunities to kind of grow, if you're kind of stagnating there and all, then it's a different case.
Correct. Sounds good. And in one of the conversations you did mention that customer is the king, And we all believe in that. There is no two ways about it. So now it's time to get the audience voice into our conversation.
Okay.
And with that, we move to our next segment, which is called Janta Unfiltered. And I just love this segment. It's one of my favorite because including our audiences in the conversation, they have an opportunity to learn. And believe it or not, we get such interesting questions that actually it's so valuable, the kind of insights that come out of it. So I'm going to read the question that we've got from one of our audiences to you.
Sure.
All right. So this question is from Vishal from Mumbai itself. And the question says, with the advancements in AI technology, do you foresee a future where platforms like Quora could be replaced by AI-driven solutions? Considering that a lot of questions today that are answered on Quora by people are taken from ChatGPT. So what implications might this have for online knowledge sharing communities and user engagement? So there are two questions, and yes, over to you.
Sure. I think interesting question from Vishal. And Vishal, thanks for asking it. So just to take you through the journey Quora has been through. Quora is in a very interesting phase. It was founded by a gentleman called Adam D'Angelo. Adam D'Angelo has always been on the forefront of AI wherever he's worked. He was earlier the CTO of Facebook before he founded Quora, and now he's of course been in Quora at the helm ever since he kind of founded it 14 years ago. So he's on the board of OpenAI as well.
Oh, interesting.
Right? And so therefore he has a front, seat view of what's happening in AI. So roughly about a year and a half ago, we launched a second app called POE, P-O-E. So POE, which is POE, is an aggregator of various bots, including ChatGPT.
Okay.
And that, however, is a completely different product. So there you typically, you ask questions, you kind of get instant answers, and there's, lots you can do. And, I don't need to tell you about ChatGPT, what can be done with that. So we wanted to see what will be the impact on Quora. Quora is, like I said, is a 14-year-old company, huge amount of knowledge which is already there, and it is all answered by humans, right? So there are people asking questions, there are people giving answers. Each question has multiple answers, and the best answer kind of moves to the top through an algorithm of how people engage and credentials of the writer and many other things. So Quora has hugely evolved in the last 1.5 years. It will be interesting to note that Quora actually has an integration with ChatGPT or POE.
Okay.
Which means that if you're on Quora and you are asking a question which doesn't have an answer, you have an option to ask POE or ChatGPT out there and get an answer. That has tremendously helped Quora in terms of it's got more users therefore coming to it, and so that a challenge. We hear this often in our life. How a challenge can be converted into an opportunity.
Yeah.
In the case of Quora, it is exactly like that. We have a second app, POE, which is one of the best AI apps, and you should definitely try it out.
Sure.
Vishal, you must try it out as well. And second, we have an integration with ChatGPT within Quora, or POE with Quora as well.
So, but is that true that like Vishal mentioned, that people are actually using ChatGPT to answer questions on Quora? Because Quora is actually known to be where I seek answers from the human and the community who is maybe an expert in the particular subject or the topic.
Quora has strong filters.
Okay.
It has very, very strong machine learning, some of the best
Sure.
the world has ever seen. So a lot of times, a lot of content on Quora is kind of collapsed, sometimes nearly 40%. So machines are easily able to identify, what are human written answers and what are like ChatGPT generated answers and all of that. So it's easy to kind of identify.
Sure.
So that is, I don't think that is a challenge as of now.
Great. Thank you. That was really insightful. And thank you, Vishal, for putting up that question. In fact, we got so much knowledge and insights into a very interesting question. And I hope that other audiences also learn from this opportunity, take this opportunity, and please send in more questions. We would be happy to put it across to our guest. So thank you so much, Vishal. All right, Gurmeet. So, it has been an interesting conversation. There is so much that we've learned right now. And I think it's time to get into some fun segment.
Okay.
So, we're going to get into the next segment, which is basically called the 60-second spin.
Okay.
And this is a fast round, a rapid fire, where you need to answer as quick as possible and with the witty answers.
Is there a buzzer?
There is a buzzer. All right. So we go right in.
Yeah, sure.
Your go-to food when you're in a hurry.
Dal chawal?
Clash with your boss or clash with your team?
Boss.
Any day. Craziest thing you've done?
Watch 3 movies in a theater in a day?
That's your crazy?
Yes.
Your proudest career moment?
My proudest career moment is, one got the opportunity of, setting up Quora from scratch and kind of, growing it not only in India, establishing it well in India, but also growing it to outside India in the APAC region, in Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and now Middle East. So that I feel very happy about and very, very proud about, for working like a company like that gave me an opportunity to,
Awesome.
grow it.
As a kid, what did you want to become?
Pilot.
And you became the CEO. One skill you always wanted to learn but haven't had the chance to yet?
Yeah, that's swimming. I always wanted to learn swimming, and it's still, I still want to learn it.
Okay, great. So I think the time is over.
Oh.
But you did well. 6 out of 10.
Okay.
So your score is decent.
I passed.
You passed. Great. Thank you so much. Hope you had fun.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So now we move to our next segment, which is the last concluding note and the concluding segment called the Expert Edge, wherein I would like you to share one thought on why leadership fails and one mantra for being an effective leader.
Why leadership fails, if I were to summarize in a line or two, it is very, very important for, a leader to be a good listener. Leaders who don't listen kind of often at some point of time kind of go astray. So the big thing on why leadership fails, in my opinion, is when leaders stop listening. And one mantra on, what was that mantra you wanted on?
One mantra for being an effective leader.
So one mantra on being an effective leader is having empathy. You need to be people-centric. You need to have empathy. You need to kind of understand people. And if you're able to understand people, because, people are your greatest strength. And if you're able to leverage people and have empathy with them and get the best out of them, enable them to come out with their best, you're surely going to be a successful leader.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and I would, just want to tell you that you've nailed it. Not because, of the traits that you mentioned, but I've personally worked with you and I know that you imbibe all of these, in your leadership. So thank you so
Bhavna.
much. I'm so happy today, to have you here and the kind of, the journey that you actually shared so candidly with us. So thank you so much for sharing, your ups and downs with us. It's been really great.
No, it's a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me. And good having this chat.
Awesome. Thank you to the audience for staying with us. We hope you found inspirational and practical takeaways from this conversation to imbibe in your own personal and leadership journey. Do like, share it with your network, and also drop a comment with one key takeaway that you're actually going to imbibe in your journey. We would be eager to hear your thoughts. Also, stay tuned to Why Leadership Fails as we bring more such inspiring stories and valuable perspectives to you. Until then, all you leaders out there, keep slaying, keep inspiring, and continue leading the way. This is me, Bhavna Lalchandani, signing off.